This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. On this segment, we look at some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. We also take a look at some of the political pieces we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 15th of June, and I am CS.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K. Again, in case you missed today's headlines, here they are. Daily Nation, death of a business mogul. The Standard, last days of Kirubi. And The Star, Uhuru, I'll back one NASA chief for presidency. First of all, I'd like to say that on behalf of the Fifth Estate TV, we extend our deepest condolences to the family of Chris Kirubi, his colleagues and his friends. Know that our thoughts and our prayers are with you at this difficult time.
As well as former MP for Jim.
Oh yes, that is very true.
Jakayo
We do have the loss of Jakayo Midiwo and his family. We also give them our sincerest condolences. On to The Star. I think it's the inspiration for all our headlines today.
That's right.
What do we have to say about that, CS?
Indeed. Yesterday, the 14th of June, the president gave the clearest indication yet that the tide of his political allegiance has shifted, and he shall bring to the shore of the promised land a different vessel other than the MV Sugoi. Meanwhile, the MV Sugoi has encountered an iceberg, albeit of its captain's own making. The structural integrity of the MV Sugoi is therefore compromised, and it is not safe for onboarding Project Kenya for onward transit to our next destination.
That's right, Captain.
And the president is adamant that he is keen to leave us in a safe pair of hands, and it is now clearer than ever that the captain of MV Sugoi is not that safe pair of hands to be entrusted at the helm. The president yesterday also intimated to the nation a line from his unpublished memoirs of his time in office, revealing to us, as history will eventually attest, that he has achieved a lot more in his second term than he did in his first. In doing so, he was reiterating the gospel of inclusion and its fruits, of peacetime dividends, and the promises we can secure when we build bridges over troubled waters. The president is telling us that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And in light of the proven success of the handshake doctrine, he has every incentive to proceed with coalescing a team of rivals. And that is what the alliance between he and the former prime minister is, a team of rivals. And it reminded us of another such team in history, Abraham Lincoln and William H. Seward, two previously bitter opponents who joined forces. Initially, Seward believed that he should have been president and even looked down on and detested Lincoln. But Lincoln still invited Seward to the table, and they put their differences aside and came together at a time when a nation stood at the cusp of division. And because they came together, they were able to become a formidable force that brought the nation together. Seward, who started as Lincoln's biggest rival, became Lincoln's confidant and biggest supporter, and even ultimately wrote, "The president is the best of us." And Seward wasn't the only rival Lincoln brought to the table. He invited even more previous opponents to the table, such as Edwin Stanton, and they formed an even more formidable team. So as a student of history, I'm inspired that President Uhuru would seek to work with a united NASA. Who knows, we may even soon see a government of national unity. Because of Lincoln's team of rivals, a nation that stood at the cusp of division remained united and even went on to stand tall amongst the community of nations. And we may even recall that as this team of rivals came together, part of the major test that America faced in the years leading up to 1858 was on the question of inclusion of the marginalized and building a bridge between the vision of nationhood that the North had and the one that the South had. It can be a tumultuous time when a nation is faced with competing visions of nationhood or the challenges of nationhood, to borrow from the lexicon of Tom Boyle. But as I conclude, however successful the Americans were in staying united in 1858, if we briefly reflect on some of the challenges of nationhood that America faces today, the tensions and divisions they face are because they did not see the inclusion project all the way through. So, as President Uhuru assembles a team of rivals to ensure that the nation remains united, the unique vision he is burdened with also has him unequivocally clear that as far as the question of inclusion and the Kenyan project are concerned, there can be no half measures. Serikali ni yetu sisi wote.
You can't have said it clearer, and I'm also inspired today. So today I'd like to talk about the politics of friendship in the context of the Star headline.
Yes.
Whereas CS has said it, it's reported that President Uhuru Kenyatta has declared that he will pick the 2022 successor from amongst the NASA principals if they unite and agree on a single candidate. So I'd say that from our reading of the president's political moves in this his final term, it is clear that he's engaging in what is called the politics of friendship. The concept of the politics of friendship is borrowed from the works of Aristotle, who defines political friendship as an agreement that is mutually beneficial, mutually pleasurable, and derived from a shared concern for goods. For instance, the handshake and the resultant BBI process was mutually beneficial to both Raila and the president. Through the pact, Raila acquired status and influence, while the president was able to implement his development agenda without impediments from the opposition. However, it should be noted that the politics of friendship is a two-edged concept. Although the immediate result is unity, the politics of friendship may lead to factional divisions within a political community, as it has done with the DP. This is because, as has been said in the past, in politics there are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests.
That's right.
Enemies become bosom buddies and vice versa, as CS has just said with Abraham Lincoln and Stanton and Seward. Alliances and political friends continually change and shift, and interests shift and change or become realigned. In 2013, the agreement between the president and the DP was mutually beneficial and mutually pleasurable, but somewhere along the way their interests diverged. And succession politics is inherently competitive, and the interests of William Ruto and Raila Odinga with regards to 2022, I think, are diametrically opposed. So, instead of ranting on certain places, a process of self-introspection to determine where his interests and the president's changed would be helpful to the DP in creating his strategy come 2022.
Yes, that's right. Now, I'm also inspired by the Star headline, and I want to make a case for Raila Odinga as president. Now, there's a good number of people who say that Raila is skilled more in the area of showmanship than in his abilities to govern. And you know what? It's true, yeah? But that's what we need in Kenyan politics today. That's what we need in our next president. Somebody skilled as a showman. And so Raila, for the next 13 months, should do nothing else but focus on showmanship. While the entire bandwagon of Gideon, Kalonzo, Musalia, Mudavadi, and even the DP talk about governance and bottom-up things, let's see whether that will win them the race to the State House. Raila, unlike the other NASA leaders, has always been thought of as a charmer, a seducer of the multitudes. And that, that's genius on his part, his ability to pander to the desires, to the whims of the masses to be entertained. That's how politics is done. And so he will win through Vitendawili, through his historical stories of Kenya and its founding fathers. He's got a really deep historical knowledge of his country. And then his magnetic personality, that's what will win the hearts and minds, not just of Kenyans, but really of Kikuyus, whom he needs in this upcoming election. But Kenyans should also not be too quick to forget. Raila has had an incredible track record during his days in the Grand Coalition government. He has a way of building consensus, particularly around thorny issues, a way of forging unity amongst leaders and even amongst citizens where there is division. So he is really a symbol of unity. But he is also Tinga. He can bulldoze, as he did with the Mao Forest evictions in the year 2010, to conserve the environment. He also did that while Minister of Roads in the first government after Kibaki had become president. And that's testament to a man who has a good sense of how to run a government. Lastly, he straddles both the worlds of being a politician and a leader. There's a distinction here. A politician is a guy who thinks more about the programs, but a leader will speak more about values and vision. And he's able to do both. A politician is consumed more by accumulation of power. A leader is focused on empowering people. Raila is also, straddles both those very well. And lastly, he as a politician obviously thinks about the next election, but a leader thinks about the next generation, and he also straddles that quite well. He's got a fair bit of all these qualities, which will make him, I think, the ideal next fifth president of Kenya.
To recall the categorization of the late Kijana Wamalwa, it seems we are leaving a season of Raila phobia and entering into the euphoria of Raila mania.
As there always is around any election, whether or not he wins.
Absolutely.
We have a three-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines. We ask ourselves two questions. Is the headline topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, and thoughtful or just plain lazy? I think out of respect for the families of Chris Kirubi, I will table the Daily Nation and the Standard, but because it inspired three thoughts, I think we should give the Star our winning headline.
Yes.
That's right.
And we have a winning headline from the Star. Now on to our final thought, but before we get there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the like button. What is our final thought?
This week on Final Thought, we are looking at human irrationality, and today we delve into a book titled The Invisible Gorilla and Other Ways Our Intuitions Deceive Us by Christopher Habris and Daniel Simons. The title of the book was inspired by a psychology experiment that was conducted by the authors of the book with students when they were teaching at Harvard University. With the students as actors and temporarily vacant floor of the psychology building as a set, they made a short film of two teams of people moving around and passing basketballs. One team wore white shirts and the other wore black. Volunteers were asked to silently count the number of passes made by the players wearing white while ignoring any passes by players wearing black. The video lasted less than a minute. Immediately after the video ended, volunteers were asked to report how many passes they'd counted. In the full-length version, the correct answer was 35. But that answer didn't matter. The task of counting the passes was intended to keep people engaged in doing something that demanded attention to the action on the screen. What was actually being tested, however, was the fact that halfway through the video, a female student wearing a full-body gorilla suit walked into the scene, stopped in the middle of the players, faced the camera, thumped her chest, and then walked off, spending about 9 seconds on screen. Amazingly, roughly half of the volunteers in the study did not notice the gorilla. The experiment has been repeated many times under different conditions with different diverse audiences and in multiple countries, but the results are always the same. About half the people failed to see the gorilla. This error of perception results from a lack of attention to an unexpected object. So it goes by the scientific name inattentional blindness. When people devote their attention to a particular area or aspect of their visual world, they tend not to notice unexpected objects, even when those unexpected objects are salient, potentially important, and appear right where they're looking. In other words, the subjects were concentrating so hard on counting the passes that they were blind to the gorilla right in front of their eyes. Essentially, the premise of the book is that it highlights our own lack of awareness of the limitations of our cognitive abilities. We all believe that we are capable of seeing what's right in front of us, of accurately remembering important events from our past, of understanding the limits of our knowledge, of properly determining cause and effect. But these intuitive beliefs are often mistaken ones that mask critically important limitations on our cognitive abilities. The Invisible Gorilla is a book about 6 everyday illusions that profoundly influence our lives. The illusions of attention, memory, confidence, knowledge, cause, and potential. These are distorted beliefs we hold about our minds that are not just wrong, but wrong in dangerous ways. The book therefore explores when and why these illusions affect us, the consequences they have for human affairs, and how we can overcome or minimize their impact.
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about the illusion of confidence. And I'll begin with a quote by Charles Darwin, who says, "Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge." And I'll talk about then how we tend to overestimate our own abilities, and that's because of confidence, which can be rather deceiving. You probably think, for example, that you're smart, perhaps even smarter than the average person. And this is just one way in which confidence can be illusory. So the author cites some national surveys done in the United States, which show that 69% of Americans and 70% of Canadians believe they're more intelligent than the average person. Now that is a little odd according to the authors, since 50% should be average or below. So there's around a 20% that have a rather lofty opinion of themselves. And so the authors cite another example. A similar result was produced when interviewing chess players at a national tournament. And so these chess players, usually they're given a distinct ranking, but the majority of them still thought they were underrated by at least 100 points. And the reason? Well, the lower the skill, the more people overestimate their abilities. And it turns out that the lower the ranking of the chess players, then the more they overestimated their chess skills. But it's not just our own inflated confidence that can muddy our reality. We also incorrectly interpret other people's confidence, assuming it to be a reliable indicator of skill. This is an interesting one. So, in one study at the University of Rochester in 1986, participants watched a video of a medical appointment. The doctor prescribed antibiotics in both clips, but in one, he acted very confidently, and in the other, he looked up the disease to make sure he was correct before writing the prescription. And the majority of the participants had more confidence in the doctor who wrote the prescription without looking up the disease than in the doctor who double-checked before giving the prescription. And that goes to show that when we see someone acting confidently, we tend to presume they're superior to someone who is looking not so self-assured.
Are you telling me to fake it till I make it and people will actually think I have made it?
Yes, fake it till you make it.
I'll look at the final chapter of this book, and this final chapter looks at what the author calls the myth of intuition. The book quotes one of the best-known cases used to demonstrate the power of intuition, and it's a case that involved the detection of a forgery. And this story is told in the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, where an art expert was able to immediately tell that a purported ancient Greek statue known as Kouros was a fake, even though scientific experts had incorrectly judged the statue to be authentic. And Gladwell's compelling story is an example of where intuition outdid analysis, but for the author, the case of the Kouros statue may be an anomaly. After all, there are many instances where an art expert has used their intuition to determine that a piece is fake only for scientific analysis to find it genuine. The question then is, why is intuition flawed? The answer lies in a false belief we all have that our mental abilities and capabilities are greater than they actually are, as JM said. We confuse how easily our minds do something with how well they are doing it. In psychological jargon, we take fluency with which we process information as a signal that we are processing it deeply and with great accuracy and skill. But what does that mean? Does that mean that you should reject intuition? Well, I think intuition has its uses, and the author says that in general, when there are few objective grounds for determining whether a decision is right or wrong, the best way to make the decision will be using your intuition. Why? Because then you'll be using an emotional response, and emotional responses tend to happen automatically and rapidly, while the deliberative processing that underlies analytic reasoning is slower. So when an emotional response is required, for example, a decision on whether you like a particular food, thinking about it only generates irrelevant information that blocks your intuitive emotional reaction. I don't know about love. We think we'll think there. Anyway, careful deliberation will outperform intuition when you have conscious access to all the necessary data. In such cases, analysis can generate new information that will help you make a better decision. For example, a situation where you have 3 job offers in 3 different locations with different packages, benefits, and challenges. According to the author, the key to successful decision-making is knowing when to trust your intuition and when to be wary of it and do the hard work of thinking things through. I think all in all was a really interesting book.
Very, very interesting book indeed.
Today we had a winning headline from The Star, and out of respect for the families of Jacoya, Medivo and Chris Kirubi, we continue to extend our condolences to their families, and we tabled the headlines of The Nation and The Standard. I will end with a quote from Aldous Huxley, the author of A Brave New World, and he says, "We cannot reason ourselves out of our basic irrationality. All we can do is learn the art of being irrational in a reasonable way." Do have a great evening.